I just want to make a brief introduction. I want to welcome all of you to Metro. Super excited to have all of you here. This is one of those great moments where, by being in New York, interesting people come through town and you find ways to pull them in. So it's been, I feel really fortunate that we have Daniel Flood, the creative manager at The Edge, all the way from Australia here. I've followed this guy's work for a long time. I really think that he's not even joking when he's talking about living on the edge. Things are pretty incredible over there. So let's have fun with this. I also want to mention that after the talk, you've got something on your chairs. Linen Hall is a bar up the way. We can all go. We can continue the conversation there. So thanks again for coming. And Daniel, it's you.
So good evening. Thank you for coming out this evening. So to begin with an introduction, I was sitting in a meeting a couple of months ago in a room that was being a graphic that shouted the downturn of lending and an inverse uptake in programming in the library space. So whether the presenter was deliberately being provocative to a largely traditional library crowd, I don't know. I didn't find it all that offensive. I'm used to living in a town where every Saturday morning a man with a bell would literally walk around the town square wearing a sandwich board saying that the end was coming. It could also be that I am not a librarian. I imagine how the presenter must have sounded to that audience, and maybe it was alienating more than it engaged. I don't believe, not that I know for sure, that he was calling for the end of libraries as we know it. People have been making their predictions since Alexandria burnt to the ground, and people have been asking since that point, what is the future of libraries? It seems to be a 10 to 15 year cycle of doomsday predictions from what I can tell. The question is asked, research is undertaken, experts are consulted, and a report emerges with recommendations that are either enacted or shelved till the next time comes around that someone asks that question, and maybe the lessons from the past be re-examined or simply ignored as being inconvenient, irrelevant, or most likely forgotten. The Edge where I'm from was a result of such a process. From the consultation process, including some of the brightest minds in the library space at the time, emerged this idea of an experiential learning space, a central meeting place, a place for communities of interest and communities of practice to gather, where people would serendipitously connect and collaborate. Initially built as a digital culture centre for art, science, technology and design, targeted at a youth demographic, specifically 15 to 25 years of age, which we never enforced. The Edge has been open to the public for a little over 5 years now, and to quote a poem by Robert Burns, which is where Steinbeck stole the line from, "But, mouse, thou art on know thy lane. Improving foresight may be vain. The best laid plans o' mice and men gang after glee, and leave us used naught by grief and pain for promised joy." That's just a little bit of hyperbole to set the scene. It hasn't been that bad at all, but evolution is rarely a completely painless process. So firstly, thank you for coming out this evening. As I was kindly introduced, my name is Daniel Flood. I'm the creative manager of The Edge at the State Library of Queensland in Australia. Our continuing mission, which is no longer to be a digital culture centre, is to empower creative experimentation across art, science, technology and enterprise for the entire of Queensland. We took design off the door, added enterprise, and we no longer specifically focus on the youth demographic of 15 to 25. There were reasons for all of these decisions, being responsive to real rather than perceived community need, coming to a mature understanding of exactly what it was that we did. Principal amongst them being that I am not a huge fan of the word serendipity, though I can now spell it as a result of having to write it down so often. When you purposefully set out to engineer serendipity, you have missed the whole point of the word. Serendipitous connectivity just happens. What we did at The Edge is to create an environment where collaboration and, for lack of a better word, magic can happen. Also, when I use the phrase this evening, community engagement, please allow it to be interoperable for the word civic engagement. And with regards to this PowerPoint presentation, it's not a lot going on there. It is mostly so when I ramble off topic, we know what it was that I was talking about and we can come back to it. So tonight I am hoping to cover off on 4 topics in various degrees of complexity. I do not claim to be a futurist or academic in these matters. My academic career stalled when the focus of my PhD collided with reality that I could do more good doing what I was doing rather than spending time researching and writing about it. And I really didn't need that doctorate anyway. So I digress. The 4 points as advertised this evening. Programming and its place in the library of the future. Experiential learning within an evolving library context. Ignorance as a choice, and the part library plays in that conversation. And lastly, the edge and its learnings after 5 years. I have got time for questions built in, giving you all ample opportunity to correct me and inform me how wrong I am on any given point. What follows is largely opinion. Opinion supported by 4 years working in the conceptual and actual space that is the edge, and 10 years previous to that working in community development for community arts organisations and technology organisations across Australia. So we will begin in the beginning then. What is the edge? It is an unassuming building on the Brisbane River. If you did not know it was there, there is a chance you would completely miss it. Most of Brisbane has on occasion. We have beautiful meeting spaces that are in these little glass cubicles that line the Brisbane River on the ground level, and in the morning you get beautiful sunshine and sparkling, beautiful views. Great for young entrepreneurs wanting to make a good impression and not wanting to pay for it. We have also got a fully kitted out Mac lab. We have a recording studio, a small coffee shop, and someone in their infinite wisdom decided the colour green would be a great organisational trademark. It wasn't. On the basement level, there is a sprawling makerspace in the constant process of becoming, and a caged-off area where the staff sit unless the Brisbane River is trying to drown us, like it did in 2011 and put us 5.5 feet underwater, which was hilarious, I can tell you. The Edge has been in operation for a little over 5 years now, except for the part where the river tried to kill us. In that time, we have been invaded by zombies a total of 3 times. We've given away computers to more than 200 community members and delivered hundreds of workshops to thousands of community. Our demographics engaged leans more heavily towards female than male, 60-40, which bucks the trend of non-gender targeted STEM programming. The general age demographic settled at 19 to 35, recent graduate to early to mid-career professional. We have a programming team of 3.6 effective full-time people, 3 full-time operational staff, a 2-person communication team, a 2-person management team, which is myself as a creative manager, and which I handle all of the public programming and engagement, and the general manager who handles the business and day-to-day operations of the space. We work in a relatively flat management structure, and have actively resisted the reintroduction of an executive director role into the organisation since the last one left 2 years ago. Prior to that, we had had 4 executive managers over 3 years. It didn't stick, and we've been happily operating in the absence of an executive ever since. The Edge is a part of this Queensland state government and operates as part of our state library. We have a budget deficit which has to be addressed annually by earnings of revenue from venue hire, consultancy, fee-for-service deliveries of programming to industry, government and not-for-profit organisations. To be clear in the upfront, we do not charge a small non-for-profit the same we would charge a large government department or corporate entity. We have a sliding scale that is involved in all fees to ensure that everyone can access the services we offer. All public front-facing programming fees to the community have been developed in what we call our 60-40 split. Once we sell 60% of all seats, the last 40% of seats in a program can be given away free of charge. Price can never be a barrier for engagement for community in our programs. We open to the public Tuesday through Saturday, 12 till 8 p.m, and Sundays 12 till 6. We offer a computer lab for digital creative practice, a recording studio, a fabrication space, all of which the community can access free of charge. We have open spaces for people to sit and work at for free. Our remit is the entire of Queensland, which is an incredibly large geographic location, which represents challenges I will discuss. We work in collaboration with all the major universities in our region. We act as a neutral ground. So if 3 universities wish to collaborate and don't know whose house they're going to go play at, they come and play with us. We work with other government departments, city councils, and the private sector. In short, we will work with anyone, so if the mood takes you, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us and propose something awesome. We work on a community development model for program, which means we program for, with, and by our community. For is where we develop programming for the community based on our in-depth understanding of what the community need is. With is where we work in collaboration with community groups to develop programs. And by is where we act as glorified landlords, where we hand the keys over and tell people to have fun. We want to move more to the left. We are presently more on the left of that spectrum in the for area, whereas we'd like to be more in the by area. That's aspirational and we're working towards that. We were, in short, established to be the library of the future. And we do a lot of community programming. So the first contentious statement assumes that anyone knows what the library of the future will actually look like. There are theories and there is research referring to the previous statements I made during the introduction, but I don't know what it'll end up being. If I had that answer, I would not be doing what I'm doing now. I would be giving TED Talks and people would be flying me around the world to pass on the good word. and I would be thoroughly miserable because, quite frankly, I enjoy what I do right now. Intermittently, people say that the internet will kill libraries. With all the information in the world available at the end of a carefully crafted search term, what purpose is there to a library? In the advent of ebooks, why do we require physical spaces to house books? Give everyone a Kindle and it will just work. No, it won't. The internet is too vast and too full of wrong information to kill the need for libraries. By which I mean plain wrong information presented as fact and mistaken for truth. This has always been the case, but where once it was a localised occurrence, the internet gives it an opportunity to go global and viral and find air where rational thought would normally kill it. Worse yet is the pervasive curation of content online. This can be said of media in general, but we assume now that television and print media is lying to us. We are naturally sceptical of anything anyone in the mainstream says to us, but when it comes to the internet and the myriad of apps available on mobile platforms to tell us the news, we tend to trust them. Libraries are in the position to correct this bias and misinformation, building communities, and through those communities, a critical and robust framework from which to understand that our experiences are being curated, that information can be wrong, and here is how you find that out. They hold the responsibility to educate and encourage critical thinking, and to provide the opportunity for relocalising learning and content creation. Information is not as important as knowledge, and knowledge requires context and testing to develop, and is nurtured by communities. Libraries always have been and will continue to be the nexus point for communities. At their very best, they are the heart of the community. The reason I'm here in the US at the moment is to visit some places that are doing that really, really well and stealing from them. By stealing, I mean that in the nicest possible way, always acknowledging and never outright plagiarising someone else's IP without their permission. That's what Creative Commons and the GPL is for. Copyright is can be the bane of good programming and should be discouraged at all time where it strangles innovation. For now, I'll just put a pin in that statement and come back to finish that thought when I'm talking about the learnings we've had from the edge. Libraries already engage communities through their collections, which by their very nature are a record and reflection of the community that they come from. Programming is an active offer to bring the community through the door and demonstrates the connection to these collections. How many children's first experience of a library is story time? How many tweens have been dropped off to engage in school holiday camps or workshops at libraries? Why couldn't similar be an adult's experience of their local library, or their specialist library indeed? Active engagement invests them in the space, localises the experience of the library as a space and place that they come to. It is different when a community group exists within that space, and there's nothing wrong with that, as these programs are ones that the library own. It's the point where libraries become relevant in the community's minds. It becomes part of their everyday. It is an active engagement that they did not know they wanted until they had it. Programming is an opportunity for users, clients, audience members, customers, whatever you would like to refer to them as, to realise that they are members of a community. By engaging in by programming that encourages active engagement with the group, it builds a shared context to operate from. In this, I'm not referring to the monolithic community, but smaller communities. So we will call these communities of interest and communities of practice, and to define them. Everyone has a passion. Whether that passion has translated into an interest or a practice is a combination of factors that's beyond the scope of what we're discussing this evening. For our purposes, practice is defined as people who make a living out of their passion, say a professional writer or a commercial coder. This is distinct from someone who has another career who finds pleasure from their passion in what they do. It would be denigrating to refer to them as hobbyists or lay people. I like to refer to them as hackers in the broadest sense of the term. These two communities will share the same programming, and it will meet a different need for each of them. Part of the complexity of developing programming in a library space is that it caters to both of these, as well as the community at large, while ensuring that all have a rich experience. We cannot allow ourselves the luxury of picking and choosing who we will and will not service. This adds a layer of complexity to the development of programming. Each has a different level of knowledge and expectation. A large part of the developer's role in programming is to redefine the user's expectation, which then, having settled that, allow me to throw a cat amongst the pigeons. Beyond these two definitions we've established, interest and practice, there is a third, more enigmatic group. Those who don't know they have a passion. Yet. If you ask someone what they want, they will answer from within their established framework. To give my really puerile example, they'll tell you they want a pony, but they're wrong. The answer exists outside of their contextual framework. They want a llama. They don't know what a llama is or how to articulate it because they've never seen a llama. How does a community member identify an interest and how to follow up on it? Because it has not gotten any easier in the 21st century to find that out. Again, yes, we have the internet, but refer back to the pony. There are thousands upon thousands of different channels, and they're all playing at once, and eventually that turns into white noise, unintelligible and impersonal. How did anyone in this room know what it was they wanted to do when they grow up? Does everyone in this room know what they want to do when they grow up? I don't know that I do. All I know, if you know, what was that decision point? Was it good teachers, good role models, encouragement from an assistant parent figure? I did a degree in performing arts, specialising in acting, and Joseph Campbell's mythic structure and its application in the writing of contemporary Germanist expression of narrative performance works. And here I am. I was really lucky. I had the opportunity to undertake an undergraduate degree with fantastic teachers who were in turn cruel and enlightening. Few of my high school classmates did. I was at a bad school with overworked teachers that did not know how to deal with an aggressively intelligent student with behavioural issues. Compound this with an overcrowded classroom and a low socioeconomic community, and you have a disastrous environment for learning. Everyone knows that, and this is not rocket science. If circumstance deals you that hand, and that hand is compounded by being a person ill-suited to traditional models of learning, what then? It brings me to reflecting upon that common promotional tagline used by the massively open online courses, MOOCs. What happens if the cure for cancer is stuck in the head of a 12-year-old child living in Mongolia? Or somewhere similar. It's an interesting point. It also hits me that what happens if the cure for cancer is in the head of a child that is a kinesthetic learner in a purely rote-based educational system? Or in a bad school? Or in a bad home? Where can they turn? How will that child know that science and medicine is something they're passionate in? Outside of school, where is there a venue where learning is at its heart, that generally has a low cost, no cost to the user entry, and is a welcoming environment? The Library of the Future can take place where the community comes for a catalytic experience that makes that light bulb go off. It does not have to be as dramatic as the aforementioned cure for cancer. It could be as simple as a curious 13-year-old that enjoys disassembling toasters for fun, coming to a realisation that engineering is actually a thing, and she might be perfectly suited to it in a small town that doesn't actually have the vocabulary to explain you should do engineering. Building a robot or modifying a Nerf gun in a local library is a tangible connection to a STEM career for a 13-year-old girl, or a 27-year-old construction worker, or a single parent, or an accountant. Who doesn't love a robot? It might be enough that they have an outlet to indulge their passions. These programs can be offered at low cost, no cost to the community if there is the will to deliver it. Both provide a tangible result that is reinforced as fact each time the outcome item is interacted with. It is a gateway for positive reinforcement by peers and might be enough to spark the question, what else could I do? The Library of the Future is a perfect place for playing in this idea. Libraries mostly do not have agendas. Libraries tend to have towards the philosophy that knowledge is amoral and knowing is distinct from doing. Libraries do not try to turn a profit, though we should not be adverse to trying to break even, and do not care how much money or education a person has or the cultural background they identify with. It's not about enrolments or prestige, but service to our communities. The library community. The patchwork quilt of communities of interest and practice that identify that the Library of the Future is a lodestone for their learning and curiosity. Programming builds these communities. If the community is buying into the program offered by the library, they are buying into the library. If their customers have self-identified that they don't read, they're actually already in the space and maybe they might be more inclined to engage in that activity. If a library is a collection-based space, then programming provides the perfect medium to unlock the collections for that community. Context is everything and programming provides context. The one thing better than a large collection is a community mingling amongst it, exploring it and reinterpreting in new and interesting ways. So moving on to the second statement, the Library of the Future experiential learning. So my ideal Library of the Future is all about experience for the individual and the community. That experience will be multifaceted, rich and engaging. It will reflect the library's values in its design and its delivery. It will have programming developed in-house or carefully curated for the community. a curation informed by an intimate understanding of the communities that the individual library engages with. This experience will not only take into account the public programming that is available, but also space design, customer service workflow, and staff interaction with those customers. All of this will be seamlessly integrated across the whole service, front through back of house. The user, client, audience won't have to ask what the institution is all about. By engaging with the institution, it will become very apparent. For the Edge, it has all been about learning about by doing. We are committed to experiential learning from the front of house to the back of house context, and accept learning by experience means that sometimes mistakes will be made. By mistakes, I mean failures. We fail. Our customers fail. When our customers fail, we celebrate their failure. This is distinct from pointing at their failure and ridiculing them for it. For example, we run an ICT self-sufficiency program inelegantly called Creative Community Computing, CCC for short. The Edge is the central disposal site for all the ICT hardware that comes out of the State Library of Queensland, which is a couple hundred computers per year. We work with community groups across several sessions, which is about 3 to 5, to rebuild these computers from the ground up, install free and open source software, and help the community to learn how they can use these computers in their everyday life. They're not allowed to take these computers home unless we believe they are utterly self-sufficient with that hardware, because we offer zero aftermarket support. During this process, between sessions, we will sabotage their computer. We will pull out cables, we will destroy their operating systems, we make them repair it over and over again, because the only way you learn is by doing. When a computer breaks as part of this process, we celebrate it, because breakage happens. Hardware will fail, especially when you're gutting a computer 3 or 4 times over a 3-day period, and open source software does not always have the same protections offered by macOS or Windows. What? You're the super user? Delete the kernel of the operating system? Sure thing, you're in charge, which then causes the whole computer to die. So why celebrate? Science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke wrote in the late 70s what has come to be known as the Clarke's 3 laws. Not as famous as Isaac Asimov's laws of robotics, they are. When a distinguished but elderly scientist states that something is possible, he is almost certainly right. When he states that something is possible, he's very probably wrong. Point 2. The only way of discovering the limits of what is possible is to venture a little way past them into the impossible. And 3, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. It is the last 2 points, particularly the third, that are most relevant to this conversation. In this example, the personal computer tends to be treated as a sacred object that should be respected. It is comparatively expensive, seen as complex, even and probably more so when it is elegantly designed, as Apple has gone to show us, and something that should not be pushed too far, lest it break. Better you just push the power button and let it do its job. It is a sufficiently advanced technology that is indistinguishable from magic. To my logic, and by extension the Edge's logic, we're not a fan of magic shows. A computer is a tool. It is a piece of hardware that needs to be used until it breaks, at which point it needs to be repaired or replaced. You should understand how it works on a deep level. No one treats a cordless drill like a sacred object. So why should we treat a computer like that? Plus, it is significantly less expensive when purchasing components and stripped of proprietary operating systems and software. It is a tool, and the experience with it, in this instance, dismantling and rebuilding it from the ground up, teaches people that fact. It guts the fear of the thing, and that is why we celebrate the failure. It is one step in a long road of learning that to fail is not the end of the world. To be curious is to risk failure on a regular, daily basis, and it is at the forefront of innovation. Sometimes failure in a safe, supportive environment encourages a healthy appreciation of failure and its use as a tool for learning. Experiencing failure is important. Experiencing success is equally as important. Experiential learning is also the middle ground for most learning styles. Whether a learner is kinesthetic, auditory, or visual, or somewhere in the middle, doing levels the playing field. It adjusts for the learner, and when done properly, delivers a sense of accomplishment. Referring to the points made earlier regards programming, when there is an outcome that the participant can reflect on, it extends the experience beyond the immediate process. Every program we run at the Edge has to have a take-home. It has to have an object, whether it's a physical object or a piece of knowledge. If we keep the robot at the end of the session, what was the point? It's the worst kind of community and civic engagement. It's where we enable the community for a short period of time. We show them all the possibilities in the world, and then we take them home with us. We have reasserted our dominance, and we have re-established the community's subservience of us. Now they know what it is that they're missing. It should always be about empowerment. It should always be about putting the tools into the hands of the community, whatever those tools might be. It is harder to design for empowerment, but no one ever said that programming was meant to be easy. Leave easy to someone else. Take the instance of that young person I've been alluding to previously. They engage in a hands-on robot building program where they take the robot home with them. Their parents see that robot and congratulate her. Tell her it's awesome. Her friends are amazed by the robot and wish that they had one too. Her experience and sense of achievement is built upon with each and every comment and observation that someone makes. That awakened dream of a pathway into STEM is given air with each comment. She needs to know more about it and do more now that she's caught the bug. And since it was the Library of the Future where she built that robot, she returns to that place for more experiential programming, to meet up with the community that she engaged with when she built that robot in the first place, to speak with the person who delivered the program to discuss what STEM looks like, to mingle with peers further along the STEM career path and have robust, healthy role models to work with. Or it might just have been a little bit of fun, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Back of house at the edge, our very first workshop we established was a disaster and unmitigated failure. I'm not too proud to admit that. There was a slew of 3D printed parts on domestic 3D printers. That never ends well. We had an untested international supply chain for componentry and a facilitator who had never delivered a program with the public before. It caused us no end of stress and at least a week worth of sleepless nights and me on the phone to suppliers in Shenzhen, pleading with them to put it in a DHL bag right then and there and get it picked up. The public, however, had a great time. And the difference between a spectacular failure and a success is PR. The first statement I give to a new member of my programming team, I would rather them fail spectacularly than succeed in mediocrity. This is not to say that I expect them to take needless risks and engage in reckless practice. On the contrary, when you're risking failure, mitigation strategies need to be more robust, more refined. Anyone can succeed with meeting in the middle. I just expect far better than that. To my team, I am the umbrella on which consequences will fall, so long as we learn from their failure, and the failure is one of ambition and not laziness or poor practice. Presently, we are exploring the possibility of building a cannon that will shoot a sub-sandwich in an edible form across a major river to hungry customers. The river is 900 feet wide. We will engage the community in the design and construction process, working with a professional engineer who will convince the process once we can clarify that what he is building is not classified as a weapon under the Australian Weapons Statute. That, and I have to assure him, he will not be going to jail for building me a sandwich cannon. We will run talks and provide copious amounts of media, including educator notes, that will unpack the science and the engineering. The final plans will be released under a Creative Commons, non-commercial attribution share-alike license, legal counsel pending, of course, and the comprehensive how could you run this in your library or school document. We will be contributing to the collective body of knowledge, and if we do our job right, we'll be inspiring. Because there's not enough fantastic in the world. And what inspires more joy than a cannon that shoots food? That is experiential learning. It links to the Library of the Future through programming. It is important to the Library of the Future as it provides the community with another avenue to engage with the library space. Why does all this matter? Point 3, ignorance. Everyone has the right to be ignorant. And allow me to clarify what I mean by that. I define ignorance in 2 separate categories, general and specific. General ignorance I do not endorse. If ignorance makes you a jerk, then you have no excuse. Address your ignorance. Specific ignorance is every human being's right, and in some instances it is unavoidable. There's only so much time and bandwidth available for us to learn things and fill in the gaps. The example I most often give when I provide tours in the Edge is my ignorance of the Italian Renaissance period. I could have learned about it, could have taken a course, read a book, or have watched what I assume the History Channel has, a 7-part in-depth series exploring the ins and outs of it in fine detail. But I haven't. There are so many other things to learn that are more relevant at this moment to my life. This is a choice I have made, and I am absolutely fine with that choice. What I am not fine with, and is the point, is where people are not always have the choice. That is unacceptable. Everyone should have a choice to learn about the world. Access to that knowledge should be free and unfiltered. Oftentimes it can serve agendas to reinforce and institute specific ignorance. Most often unconsciously, maybe, with the rising costs of tertiary education. Sometimes it's purposeful. Other times it's a reality of a person's circumstance and not having an opportunity to address it. Libraries have historically provided this to the community through the collections and programs. The future library will be more active in addressing this. There are things that cannot be easily learned from books that are more easily learned by actively doing. The Creative Community Computing project I mentioned earlier is a perfect example. You can read a step-by-step guide to computer rebuilding and get the job done, but this is not the most efficient way of acquiring that knowledge. It is a process that on paper is full of jargon, that an active engagement setting can be readily explained and moved through quite effectively and quickly. The method of working overcomes cultural and linguistic barriers and can be tailored to meet identified and emergent needs. So much ignorance is instituted by a lack of access. Part of my joy seeing the maker movement merge into the library space is the interest and access to fabrication tools normally restricted to industry, tertiary institutions and wealth. Sure, there are hacker spaces and tech shops, which at times are not the most welcoming spaces for the non-nerd, or in many instances for women. This past Australian summer we worked with 7 families from low socioeconomic communities to design and manufacture, in partnership with an amazing local business owner, an outdoor playhouse for their children. They worked with industrial designers to conceptualise and design their playhouse. Learned how to steer the creation of their design in Illustrator. We will be moving to a much simpler platform, Tinkercad, with the next iteration of that project, because Illustrator can be really confusing. And when their playhouses came back from the CNC machining, they came back in and painted them and prepped them for installation in their backyards. 3 of those parents have come back to undertake training with us in industrial design practices so that they could do this process again. Many of these families have young people with specific needs. So to actually be able to customise a playhouse that accommodated for a wheelchair, they have specific componentry designed to activate the attention of a young person with Asperger's. They would never have thought that they could do this themselves. This was outside of their expectation. And exceeding those expectations in this fashion opened up the possibilities of exceeding other established limitations, if they want to. It is their choice. All we can provide them with as the library of the future is opportunity. Libraries are, by their definition, as was inferred earlier, welcome, opening and safe spaces. We do not have political agendas in this context. I can appreciate there are always political agendas at play, but they're not generally those that interfere with the client-facing service. That's the reality of being a grown-up, of course, working in a grown-up world. Actively addressing ignorance through programming that is focused on the hands-on and the experiential. That is the core of the Edge's community civic engagement, and that is what it has evolved to do. Which brings me to things that we have learned at the Edge over the past 5 years. So that's the context. So now I'd just like to go through what it is, the lessons we've taken away. We've accepted that this will take time, and building stakeholder expectations has been one of our greatest learnings. Do not build it and expect that they will come, or that magically they will know you exist. We were given a building and a team and told to make magic happen. That was literally the extent of the instruction that was given us. It took 3 years to find a sense of rhythm and direction to communicate with the community and build trust in what we would deliver to them as part of our mission. Trust takes time, and you have to earn it. Like respect, the more you demand it, the less you are going to receive it. That is the nature of community building, and we have become very good at explaining to stakeholders, both internal and external, why everything takes so long to get done. There's been a realization that our community itself is our biggest asset. They tell us when we're making mistakes, that we could do what we should be doing better and what they think we should be doing next. They are also a source of experts I cannot afford, and they have been most likely the place I've recruited new staff members from. They are what makes amazing happen, and the reason we are doing any amazing in the first place. Sometimes it is all too easy to get caught up in the sense of self-importance, that we are the centre of the universe and the most important element in the equation of our organisation. We are not. It is our community. A really good example of this point was in our initial days, I had the pleasure of engaging with a couple of very clever coders, people I could not afford, people whose hourly rates were in the $400 to $500 an hour thing, worked for major government contractors. Generally, I'd say, hey, what are you doing at the moment? And they go, I can't tell you because you haven't got the required security clearance. And they weren't saying that to be funny. And one day, I made the stupid suggestion, which is what happens quite often. I said, let's make a room that sings. That merely moving through the space will cause the room to make sound, and each person added to that will allow them to the sound to alter and to mix the sound. We wanted to use an Xbox Connect. This was when the Xbox Connect had just been released and before Microsoft was legally allowing people to use them. So what they did was they sat down and over 3 days, 2 of them rewrote the entire software of the Xbox Connect. They eliminated the hands up. We're familiar with the Xbox Connect, you have to hold your hands up like that for it to lock onto you. They wrote that out in 2 days and replaced it with a system that allowed you to just to paste on a skeleton onto a person that would generatively learn as it went along. They were tweeting Microsoft saying, idiots, why have you done this? Here is the much simpler way to do it. You can imagine what Microsoft's response was, abject silence and the occasional please stop tweeting at us. After 3 weeks, they built it. It was beautiful. The Xbox Connect plugged into Ableton Live through an OSC interface, and it worked. And the opening night, we had 120 family members come through and engage in the work. And those coders were there watching it. And what happened was they stared at it, and one of them came over to me and said, this is the first time I have ever seen anyone in my career smile because of a piece of code that I have written. That person went on to quitting their very well-paid job and moved to Far North Queensland where they work on art projects for a living, providing services to artists and non-profit organisations that could not afford their services because in their mind it was better to do something good than to get paid lots. And that story I've seen over and over again with our time at the Edge, and they're the people who are now on my staff, and I'll come to the reason why we have those people shortly. Being daring, taking risks, and when you tell people that you would rather them fail spectacularly than succeed in mediocrity, you have to mean it. When things go wrong, and believe me, they have gone wrong in spectacular fashion, I am the person that gets metaphorically, or in 1 or 2 instances, not metaphorically yelled at. People do not yell at my team. I am the person that gets to metaphorically yell at my team. And I very rarely have had to do that, and it has only been in the case of dire incompetence, where the staff member then resigned the next day because they had ballsed up so badly. As I mentioned earlier, I encourage people to reach for the stars in the full knowledge they're not always going to get there. Commitment to that and repeatedly delivering on that promise as a manager creates the environment where people will take risks. The moment I don't do that, the moment I punish a staff member for taking a calculated risk, the game is over. To be honest, it both serves and disserves in equal measure that I have developed a thick skin and a fairly blunt demeanour. It generally means that I have the trust and respect of my team and the community, and quite often senior managers in the organisation staring at me like I am some kind of obstinate plant speaking a foreign language. Localisation is incredibly important. We've been involved in a couple of projects over the years that has tried to wholesale transplant a process from overseas into an Australian context and watch it die painfully, miserably, very, very publicly. What works in Jamaica or the Netherlands or Tanzania does not translate without translation and localization to your space. A metaphor that works in a bad community outside of Kingston, Jamaica, which is a multimedia lab located inside a rubbish bin, which is then accompanied by a second rubbish bin in which you have to place your guns and knives before you can actually use the equipment for media production, does not translate to an urban community in a well-to-do suburb. In a country where troubled teenagers 9 times out of 10 are smoking marijuana and are a little bored. There's a big difference, not only in the context and the metaphor, because as soon as you put a wheelie bin in front of them, they all went, well, that's rubbish, quite literally. But also the practice and process didn't translate. If the practice and process and the worker you're engaging with is used to dealing with people that are going to be violent, that are going to be high on substances that will cause violence, and then you translate that context into kids who aren't, there is a disconnect. And as an organisation, you have to be willing to work with that person to unpack that and to alter it, or sometimes even shoot it in the head, metaphorically speaking, and let it go. There's nothing worse than flogging a dead horse. If we see something we like, or if we want to work in partnership, we have to ask the specific questions for how will this sit with our community? How will this need to change for them to engage with it? Is it appropriate? We will never undertake another project again without asking those questions over and over again. I will not be afraid to tell a recalcitrant contractor that no, their contract will not be renewed. They can take their IP and they can go home. Because in the end, the damage that a bad project does to your community and does to your reputation within the community is more than having to bite the bullet and then face up to the board, who will then shake their finger at you and you'll go, yep, no, oh, that was terrible. Yeah, I'm sorry. Have you finished telling me off now? Are you going to fire me? No? Okay, let's move on. First and foremost is having staff driven by curiosity and who will chase ideas down rabbit holes like Alice in Wonderland. The best employee for me are those who treat problems like they're a dog with a bone. That is what I look for now when I interview and recruit new programming staff. They don't have to know everything. Personally, I would much rather they don't, because the person who knows everything has no room to learn more. I want them to burn with a need to find an answer, and then the need to share their findings. And I say need, not want, because it transcends the thought that, oh, it'd be nice to know that, and actually comes down to something quite primal and biological. Finding and nurturing those people is a large chunk of the work the Edge does, and I have lost many contractors over the years to other organisations because I'm damn good at engineering these people. In the arts, science, technology and enterprise space, it is a capacity to turn curiosity into rich engagements and to be able to communicate that to the world. That is rare, and sometimes you have to make it you have to make it so that other people can steal it. The officer who does all my outreach work, he is a former commercial music producer. If you've watched enough History Channel, you may have actually heard his music underscoring several wildlife documentaries. He's produced major albums for major acts, and he had a child and realised he couldn't fly around the world anymore. He couldn't go to Los Angeles at the drop of a hat from Brisbane, Australia to produce an album, and was thinking about going to IT. I was the devil. I came to him and said, well, you can go and do IT and get paid really well, or you can come and do good things. You can come and turn that curiosity, and it's a curiosity that I learned about the hard way. I once asked him a question about a computer program that I couldn't explain and couldn't understand. And he went, oh, yeah, I'll have a think on that for you. 2 o'clock in the morning, the next day I got a phone call. I've solved it, I found it, I've sorted it, I've got, He was like super excited, and I said, dude, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, call me at 8. That was the reason I hired him. Because I knew he does not let go. That he just chases it and chases it and chases it and has to know. And that reflected a little bit of I found that reflection of myself and the other staff we had and knew it was going to work. The staff member that has a lack of curiosity is the one who does not last. They're the ones who treat it as a job, and sometimes if you're developing new and interesting things, it has to be a little bit more than a job. Not being everywhere, if you're clever about it. We can't travel to all of our communities. We learnt that the hard way. The geographical immensity of Queensland prohibits it. For every day spent in a remote community, I lose 2 staff members for 3 days, which adds up to 1 staff member for over a full week. It's good work, but it's an inefficient spend of resource. Instead, we're looking at publishing everything in a ready-to-deliver format that remote and regional communities can download, and they can get on the phone and ask us all the questions that they would like. But these will be offered for free. It's not us quite often that these communities need, rather what's in our heads. And that it exists only in our heads has to stop, and instead has to be translated into a human readable form. This process is deeply rooted in my deep and abiding hatred of reinventing the wheel. The number of times that I have developed a solution to an incredibly complex problem, only to discover that someone else has done it, and we just weren't aware of it, angers me. Because it costs me money. If I have to throw $10,000 worth of staff time at a problem that could have been solved by reading a 3-page document, I'd rather have read the 3-page document. If we find that, how many other people find themselves in the same circumstances when they hear about the projects that we have developed? How many people in this room alone might have solved the same problems that I have? We're committed to working with partners to make that happen. Partners that are anywhere and everywhere, because we refuse to be parochial about it. Yes, we're in Queensland, Australia. It is an 18-hour plane ride from New York, which I am not looking forward to on Sunday night. But what works in regional and remote Queensland, with some localisation, will work equally as well in New York, or Tanzania, or Kingston, or Vladivostok, or Cambodia. Just on. So, all of the material we're creating, we're releasing under a Creative Commons license, but we still make money. We've made a commitment from a programming perspective 4 years ago that we will sell the cleverness that made the object and not the object itself. After all, you can only sell an object once. But the cleverness, you can lease time and time again. At the outset, we weren't sure we were going to work, and I was dealing with a manager who said that's silly, and I was happy to prove them wrong. Even when you give it away for free, people either don't have the times, skills, or inclinations to do it themselves. We went from self-funding 0% of our programming annual budget, which is $100,000 Australian, to generating 60% of that budget through direct revenue raising over a 2-year period. People always need something bespoke made, and we cater for that need. To quote my favourite Kenny Rogers song, you have to know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em, know when to walk away, and know when to run. Working with communities is a funny thing in programming. They need you to teach the framework, bring the energy, passion, and tools to do awesome things, and when they have it, they will soar. And I've seen this time and time again. When they soar, they are going to leave you behind, and you have to let them. As a library, we'll always be part of we will always be part of our community at the Edge. But when we do our job right, we are an outsider from that community, and we need to be that. To remain objective and not become the subjective participant that needs to be a certain amount of removal. It's the hardest thing in the world to see awesome happen before you and not swim in it. If you choose to swim in it, you are of less use to your community, and as I said earlier, it is all about the communities that we service. Further to this, ego has no place in working with communities, and I question its place in a library. The organisational and personal need for self-worth needs to be gleaned from basking in the reflective glory of what your community has achieved. People will be grateful, but if you have made them feel that way because, gosh darn it, Grateful is what they should feel. You've made a mess of it, and they will come to resent you. The greatest successes are those that have left me feeling hollow and deflated. It's the point where the community is gathered around afterwards looking at me going, why are you here? You're not part of this any longer. I was lucky enough when I felt that sensation for the first time to have someone there that took me by the shoulder and said, and explained that they knew what I had achieved was huge, and that I needed to reflect upon the fact that I was the catalyst for that I needed to go home and have a stiff drink. Now I play that role for my team and the emerging professionals that we're transitioning from being users of our services to members of our team. If the edge expects best practice, then sometimes we need to model it. Lastly, on that point, the greatest learning I have, and that has been reinforced time and time again with my work at the edge, the thing you do when you commence a process with communities, whether that is a project or, in this instance, I'm speaking of my employment, is to plan my exit from the outset. Know what you are setting out to achieve, and understanding how you will transfer ownership at the conclusion is imperative. If you are committed, as the Edge is, to program for, with and by the community, you have to accept that you will hand the process over to that community at some point, and you will step away. Aspirationally, there will come a time when we do not actively run programs in our space. That the community that we have engaged with over maybe a 5, 10, 15-year period will become the custodians of our program. And we have to be committed and willing to hand them the keys and go away, even if that criteria is aspirational. Knowing that and sticking to that will prevent the organisation from becoming part of the problem that you set out to address. I know where the end is in my role. I accept that there will come a point where I will cease to be of use in the process, and I will instead become the anchor that stops it from flying. Then I leave for my next adventure, hopefully one step prior to that. I want the Edge to be awesome as it can be, and it would break my heart if I were the problem. It is something that we as a team discuss annually, and we're very open about it. And that's something that's a learning that I've had, is being open about these conversations. And I discuss it with our management team regularly. It is not about being a cult of personality, but it is about being an organisation with a strong vision. That vision cannot be one person. Everyone in the organisation needs to buy that vision. Otherwise, you don't achieve it. They need to buy in on the culture, which is what you're establishing. At the Edge, we have learnt the hard way about succession planning and managing transition, especially when there are so many moving parts in our organisation. We have not always done this well. There are still parts of it that we do poorly, but we know that and we are trying to get better. I even have my last meeting planned out and have done this since the day I started at the Edge. It's going to cost me around $300, and I would like to share that dream with you in the closing of my presentation. I sit through a metric ton of meetings on a weekly basis. Most of them put me to sleep or make me angry. My staff like to think it's the time when I respond to most of their emails, as they sit there furiously ignoring what's being said. Not always, but sometimes. I will come to my last meeting and there'll be something I need to present. I will stand up and address the gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, I could provide you with an update of the project's process and trends, but I thought it better served in song. At that point, a barbershop quartet in full outfit and waxed hair will walk in, and I out of the room onto my next adventure. Mic dropped for the next person. I'm not joking. That's how you live on in an organisation, isn't it? You know, if I do that, in 10 years' time, there will still be this rumour of, there was once this time a man ended his thing in song. And that sets the bar incredibly high for your replacement as well. The last job I left prior to that, I was trying to get a toxic waste suit imported in time because I wanted to go to my last meeting full hazmat outfit. So when they said, what are you doing? I was going to say, the air in here is toxic. I can't be here any longer. These are the things that keep me from, bursting into tears and breaking on several occasions during my employment. That is my email address, and that is the Edge's website. Thank you for your time. Have you got any questions?
to see some places here in the United States.
Yep.
Would you share with us what those places?
This time around? Yeah, it was the Exploratorium in San Francisco. I tried to get to Pier 9, run by Autodesk, which is their major fabrication lab, but I couldn't get in there, which was really upsetting. Chattanooga Public Library in Tennessee with their Level 4 facility, which if anyone has any questions, Nate would be able to answer them far better than I would. I met with a gentleman called Jason Giffey down there who created a project called the Library Box, which is an amazing tech project for distributing information where there aren't necessarily internet infrastructures. In IBM Studios, Three-Legged Dog here, NYDC Films. Now I'm trying to remember where else I've been. Tried to get in touch with an organisation in Chicago called Reframe Foundation, which has been buying up row houses and squatting houses and turning them into cultural spaces throughout Chicago. And it's like trying to convince the Chicago City Council they should put a green zone that incorporates all 7 facilities they've already got, which is a really awesome project. Chicago Public Library, Fayetteville Public Library, up in upstate New York for the amazing Fab Labs, and anywhere where anyone is pointing me towards saying you must go speak to these people. Also, I have to admit I'm a massive nerd, and 4 days of my trip was spent in Indianapolis at Gen Con playing Dungeons and Dragons. That's the way I could disguise it as a tax write-off. So, yeah. Any other questions?
That's quite a range in terms of things that you saw. I mean, what impressed you or really took you, you know?
Meeting people doing the same things and actually realizing that sometimes you're not alone. Sometimes when you're out there creating stuff in art, science, technology land, such as 3D printed slime mold racing workshops, because slime mold has the amazing ability of finding the quickest way out of a maze at all times. It never takes a wrong turn, which I thought people were lying to me when they told me about it until someone turned up with their PhD in high-end computational mathematics and interrelationships of complex networks, where they use slime mold to show how pathways would diverge. I didn't read it. It was far beyond my expectation. But what we do is slime mold grows in most major riverways. So we take groups of people down the river, we harvest slime mold, we get them to design a maze in Tinkercad, which can be printed up on our 3D printers. They print in polylactic acetate, which is a biodegradable plastic derived from sugarcane and corn crops. It's what they compress the oil out of it to make the filament. You print the maze, you embed it in an agar dish, you release the slime mold in a growth medium to a food source, close it up, and you can take it home. And when we do that, we keep all the scientific terms in there. We don't dumb it down for anyone. We force people to learn science. And then they take it home, and one of three things happen. Either one, you've put the maze in correctly, and the slime mold will trace the quickest path out of your maze. 2, it will burrow its way under the maze because you didn't suspend it inside the agar properly. 3, PLA is biodegradable, and sometimes the slime mold will eat the plastic. So yeah, what was I saying? So coming up with those sorry, I've lost my train of thought. But yeah, so coming up with those practices, I'm able to share them and realise that we're not alone when we come up with these crazinesses. Because when you develop it in isolation, you're sitting there going, am I mad? Does this make sense? Could this be replicated? Have I overshot the moon? The Playhouse project I referred to when we were developing it, I have to admit that was very nearly a failure. I was pig-headed about it. I said it has to be possible and we have to be able to do it for free. Which then I spent 2 weeks going around to every single person who owned a full sheet CNC machine in Brisbane begging them to do it for free. Which the amazing business I referred to was a guy who ran an engraving shop who just said, sure, I'm not doing anything over Christmas, have my shop. And he gave us the keys. But to be pig-headed about it and achieve it, and now we get to refine it based upon that. But being able to talk to other people and them go, yeah, that's great. You're not crazy. You're actually just coming up with, a new and interesting way to try and get yourself fired. Any other questions? Yeah.
So you clearly tap into a lot of new scientific ideas and that kind of thing.
Yep.
Where
Blogs, the internet, Facebook, Twitter. I have a PhD in biochemistry working for me presently. The joy of the edge is we don't have to hire librarians. We can hire any person who's an expert in the given field. science fiction, weirdness, outright lies. Waking up in the middle of the night going, wouldn't that be cool? ... Like we currently have 400 litres of kombucha growing in our basement in giant tubs we've purchased from IKEA and using the kombucha fungus as a organic and vegan leather for the purposes of fashion design. So we're presently working with university students who are doing their second half of their first year in fashion, who then have to design clothing and accessories out of that material and use it. So our entire basement reeks of fermenting black tea. Why did we do that? Because we realized we saw someone else did it, thought it'd be cool, and then just bought literally 400 kilograms of sugar and 100 kilograms of tea, which I can assure you the library receiving those pallets had a little freak out. The oddest thing, and part of the joy of my job is racking up things on my corporate credit card that freak people out, and then I get phone calls from the department asking me to account for my spending. Taxidermied spiders, body bags we bought for our zombie apocalypse because I had 2 people wanting to create body bags that would twitch based upon people approaching them, and you would not believe how hard it is to legitimately buy body bags. Because when you ring up a funeral supplier saying, "Hi, I'd like to buy 4 body bags, please," and they go, "What funeral home do you represent?" "No, I work for a library. Can I please have 4 body bags?" They say, "Can I please speak to your manager?" And I'm saying, "You're speaking to the manager. Here's my credit card details." And then you have the conversation around, "It's not illegal for you to sell me body bags. Please sell them to me." And I've had many of those engaging conversations about the relative legality or illegality of various substances. Presently, I have a personal desire to create programs that make my CEO slightly nervous. Presently, we're developing a project called Dangerous Fridays, which is taking the idea that all knowledge is amoral and we should be able to indulge in knowing these things without being criminals. The first session of which is Orange is the New Black Friday, where we'll be teaching prison tattooing, how to make a shiv out of a plastic bag and how to defend yourself in prison. Because there is a certain level of curiosity that kind of sits with everyone to have those kinds of ideas. It also attracts a brand new audience to our space that we wouldn't always ordinarily be able to access. So ideas come from anywhere we can find them. Anything that is a combination of... It's what is defined, I suppose, as what is cool. And that coolness is defined by the team that we work with and our partners, and that middle ground where our thought processes meet and intersect, and we can draw a circle around it and say that's cool. That's the definition of cool for us. Which is not the same definition as cool for everyone else, but it is for us and our communities that we engage with. Any other questions?
So on that note,
Yep.
I'm just curious, how many members of the community would you reach?
Coming through the building, so people who just enter into the building don't necessarily actively engage. We have about 120,000 people through the door a year. We last year had 16,000 people engaged directly in our community programs, which range from people engaging in our ongoing workshop program, people engaging in our large form projects, and also people who came to our open days and tried to break the various pieces of sculptural and installation work that we built, including giant slidey puzzles. You know the number puzzles you'd have as a child, you could slide numbers around. We built a giant scale one of those that was a video mixing desk, and then people thought it was a great thing to place their children on top of to take photographs. And when you can't explain to them it's made out of fragile acrylic, please take Tommy off there. Oh God. So yeah, and that number has grown by about 15 to 20% per year. We offer anywhere between 2 to 450 engagements, programmatic engagements per year with community. By programmatic, I'll clarify, we mean individual engagements. So if a workshop program runs for 5 days, we count, or 5 sessions, each one of those is an engagement. So we do lots and lots of stuff. More than we try not to think about it too much, and we try not to look at the list too often, because then we get that sick feeling in the pit of our stomach. Or we have that moment where we turn around and go, "Oh heck, it's July. Where did the first 6 months of the year go?" So yeah. Any other questions? Did we bring it to a close?
all right, folks.
Yeah.
Let's follow.
I have a follow-up. You said there's a biochemist on your team.
Yeah.
What other skills
The biochemist, he's a former head of a major high school science department who resigned because he was sick of doing marking and couldn't work within a bureaucratic structure any longer. So then he came to work for me because I don't make him mark. And when he comes to me saying, can I do this? 9 times out of 10, the answer is always, yeah. Can I grow this in my base? Like he's presently looking at the use of mushrooms as a structural medium and the capacity for us to grow mushrooms into designed structures. It's being used a lot now for packaging. I think Amazon is doing some packaging with mushrooms. It's used by DARPA to make self-destructing drones. So they actually make the body out of a mushroom, skin it in chitin, which is the stuff that is the shell of crustaceans is made of, which you can also grow in a kitchen. And so what happens when you want to destroy the drone is you ditch it into a puddle, which then dissolves the mushroom, dissolves the chitin, and then causes the circuitry to burn out. So you can actually have zero evidence. So he came to me and said, I want to grow mushrooms. I said, that's great. I want you to grow a chair. He went, yep, I can grow a chair. That's fine. I'll grow a chair. I said, I need to be able to sit in it. And he went, and I said, too late. You've already said you're going to grow a chair. Off you go. So presently we have a back room that is completely wrapped in clear plastic, like something out of an episode of Dexter. And in there is growing a chair. We're up to our 4th iteration of it. First fungus we started using was a native Australian fungus that was incredibly fast growing and hardy. We realised though that it would actually spore and grow within cavities in the human body. So it will actually grow in your nose. So we found a non-sporing version of it from a researcher in Amsterdam, but we're having, I'm going to Turkey. I'm trying to get someone from Amsterdam to meet me in Turkey. I'm trying to get clearance from our customs before I go in 3 weeks' time to get me a sample so I can bring it back in the country, because it grows 4 times as fast and has a structural density 6 times higher than oyster mushrooms, which is the next best thing we've managed to grow. And when it dries, it comes out essentially like hard styrofoam. So biochemist. My outreach officer who runs the Creative Community Computing Project is the aforementioned commercial music producer, who also maintains our recording facility and provides advice to community organisations around developing radio programs. I just closed advertising for a commercial digital fabricator to work in our fabrication space downstairs to run our laser printer, a laser cutter and 3D printers, sewing machines and tool shop. I have my lead program officer and I both have degrees in drama and no other qualifications than that. But I come back to the top of the point around curiosity is what makes us choose these staff. If they're not curious, we don't hire them. Oh, and I have an admin officer who is a commercial game designer, which again makes my life incredibly easier when I say I need to run a workshop in Unity game design. Hey, admin officer, go make commercial games again. So, and also multi-skilling. I can talk a good science game now. It's mostly lies, but it's enough to get me out of a jam. And with programming, we always try and stay, if we have to, 1 step ahead of the community. So long as I know all the answers for today, and I'm then willing to go, I have no idea, let's go to Google and find out. So yeah, but we often call out for specialists, and when we find a good specialist, I then will try and rewrite my budgets to keep them. The science officer was only meant to be a 12-month appointment, and I've now had him for 18 months, and I plan to keep him forever. Because when you put science in the door, you can't keep it there if you don't have a scientist. Because then you're just playing, silly buggers science. Or we need to get a really good commitment of volunteer scientists, which we do have, but then you can only call upon volunteer scientists so much before their real jobs get in the way. Yes?
Besides the government, what other financial support do you get? The basis, is the government 90%, 50%?
80% at the moment, and that number slowly changes every year.
90%, so 10% comes from where?
18 to 20% comes from, all of our venue is available for hire, and we hire that out again on a sliding rate. Corporates pay through the nose. Community organisations pay 30% less than corporates. Partners pay 50% less than corporates. And if we think it's a really good project, people pay nothing. Our programming, again, same thing. If a corporate comes to me and says, hi, I want you to build arcade machines for us, I'll go, fine, here's a commercial bill for it. And they pay, because they don't know any better. Community organisation comes to me and asks that, and I will charge them significantly less to nothing, if I can get away with it. That number rises every year. The end target is that I would be receiving no money from government to deliver our programming. and that we would be delivering it purely from revenue, deriving our own revenue, because that's the only time a model becomes self-sustainable. And also, we're part of the process when we were set up as an experiment. And part of it was to say, if we give you less money, what are you going to do? And all of our staff have taken it as a personal mission to make more money than we've been asked to, just to stick it to the proverbial man. So, yeah.
My question is, who doesn't want to go have a beer with this guy? Linen Hall, 3rd Avenue and 13th Street. Thank you all for coming out. Let's have another round of applause for this awesome.